Do you have a 401k or an IRA or a 403b, any type of account like that where you have beneficiaries? Did you know there's some problems? There's some mistakes that can be made. Today on this episode, we're going to talk about those and tell you some specific strategies about beneficiary designations. Enjoy the show.
We hope you've been enjoying all the episodes from the Secure Your Retirement podcast. If you'd like to keep learning and receiving these episodes, then hit the subscribe button and turn on notifications by hitting the bell so you receive alerts when each episode comes out. We've helped thousands of listeners get on the path to securing their retirement. Now it's your turn. Let's dive in.
Welcome, everyone, to Secure Your Retirement podcast. Today, Merce and I are going to have a conversation around the topic of beneficiaries. And you might think about this and think, well, how hard is beneficiaries? Well, let me tell you, there was an article this week on Market Watch, and the article's premise was all around the fact that this couple died, and the goal of them were to leave their 403b account, the money in there, to their grandchildren. Now, there's a really good reason why a person would do that versus leaving it to their children. There's a big tax benefit, especially if your children don't really need the money. And we can maybe hit on that a little bit in our conversation today. But ultimately, what happened is the article was saying that the money now had been tied up, and Tia Kreff is who had the money, TIAE Kreff, and they were not releasing the funds. And the reason why is because the grandchildren, were not listed properly as beneficiaries. And the premise as to why that was the case is that the beneficiaries had been changed. They had put in the form, but they did not get spousal consent properly. And in a 403b or a 401k, if I'm going to change beneficiaries, I have to get spousal consent. An IRA, I do not. And so that's just a really big deal. So I think maybe we could just do this. We could just kind of, Merce, if you maybe just could explain what a spousal consent, why that's important, and first of all, why people need to understand, why do I need my spouse's consent on a company plan like a 401k or a 403b or anything like that?
Yeah, I think there's certain laws that come through. I believe it's ERISA that establishes a lot of the workplace retirement plans where you've got 401ks, 403bs. Those are your two most common workplace retirement plans. And by default, they assume that the spouse is to become the primary beneficiary. And this kind of goes back to, pension times, and whether or not this is an outdated rule or not, that's not the argument for today or the conversation for today, but it kind of goes back to like the world back when there was pensions, and you had a pension so that and you had these options to leave certain portions of the pension, if you were to pass, that would continue on to your survivor, which had to be your spouse. And so they kind of took that rule of making sure that the spouse was taken care of on the pension side, and they brought it into the 401k, 403b retirement space as well, saying that if there is, and I guess it was more for if there is one primary earner and one primary saver, well, the surviving spouse should have first rights to the assets as the primary beneficiary, unless they are willing to sign off on this thing called a spousal waiver. We've seen this, this document hundreds of times at this point. Uh, and it is interesting. So, Rayden, it sounds like in the article, they submitted the beneficiary change form, but it sounds like they didn't realize that that was rejected. Is that right?
Yeah, so they got rejected. And the reality was, in this particular situation, they actually did, I think, get the communication back, but just didn't understand. They basically got a transmission saying we received it. We received the beneficiary designate, change form, but they didn't realize that it did not get established. And this is a common practice, by the way. They went online, and when they went online and they looked to see, hey, do you actually are my beneficiaries correct? And what it said on there is, it says beneficiary form on file, and it
Mm-hmm.
didn't list out all the beneficiaries. That's a very common practice. However, that does not mean that the beneficiaries are listed correctly. It just means that they've got a list of beneficiaries or a beneficiary there. And so that can be really misleading on that. So let's just talk for a second here, Merce, about like what our protocol is if we're going to get a beneficiary change and somebody calls up and says, I want to change my beneficiary. I think all the steps that we go through to make sure that everything is done properly and how we would verify, because there is some cases, like I know at Charles Schwab and even Fidelity, we can see most beneficiaries unless we've got a lot of them listed. And then if we got a lot of them listed, let's say we've got, and I think in this case in the article, there was 8 or 9 grandchildren, maybe even
Mm.
more. And that's when they'll go to this whole thing on file. And so what is it that you find is a good practice if you've got that scenario and you see that on file? What would you do with the company just to make sure that, hey, you know what? I see it's on file, but how can I verify?
Right. Yeah. And so before I answer that, what just triggered in my mind is, the spousal consent document, that waiver that they're supposed to sign. I know that that document typically has to be notarized as well. So they could have gotten it and thought nothing of it, or didn't take the time to get it notarized and never resubmitted it. And so now the issue they're dealing with as well, it looks like an account is now in the probate process, which is a whole nother pain to deal with. But which is a big reason as to why you want to do what I'm about to say, which is double check, double and triple check your beneficiaries. So let's just imagine that you've updated your beneficiaries online. So you are right, Radon. Schwab and Fidelity, I think they do, and a lot of the brokerage firms today do a really good job of showing you on your online platform, whether it's Schwab or Fidelity or Vanguard or Wells Fargo or Morgan. All these bigger ones have gotten pretty good at showing you online exactly what your beneficiary is, and the percentages and the relationship and all those things that you've set up. So double checking that often, I think, is good. But sometimes they don't show it. Either they'll show on file or complex beneficiaries, which means maybe that's because you added a per Stirpes designation, or maybe you've got some different trusts that are added as beneficiaries, and it's too much for them to list out on their website. So they say complex, or they'll say on file. But in any event, when you don't have clarity, it's always really good to just double check and call the institution. This is really common in the insurance space. Insurance space, the websites aren't as savvy as some of the other ones, as some of the brokerage accounts. So, in the insurance space, whether it's life insurance or long-term care or annuities or anything like that, what we do is every year we're calling over to the insurance company to verify what those beneficiaries are on file on their systems, and making sure it is what the client's objectives are. And we've taken that to such a degree to where, because the last thing we want is this scenario that this article is all about, is the beneficiaries aren't who they thought they were. Because once death happens, you can't really fight the beneficiary form at that point. It's very, very difficult. um, and so part of our financial planning strategy meetings that we do every year, at the beginning half of the year, is we have a part of the agenda is to verify beneficiaries. So our team pulls the beneficiaries either through the websites if they have them available, or calling the insurance companies, or even in the private investment space, calling them up and just verifying beneficiaries on file. And then we gather that, and then we make that part of the conversation. Hey, is everything good? Is this how you want your beneficiaries to be? Percentages okay? Was anyone born? Anything changed that we need to be aware of? Things like that, I think, are, while it can be overkill at times, it's just such a good thing to have in practice, to be double checking it year over year. Because life happens, things change, people get born, people get divorced, and sometimes we neglected the beneficiary form. So just kind of taking that extra step is a really nice way to cover us for sure.
Hey, so while we're on this topic of beneficiaries, I think I'd like to kind of talk through some understandings, I guess, and what people may think, because I just had a conversation today with somebody, and they were a little bit confused about this. So when we're setting up an estate plan, you've got a will. Most people, everybody should have a will. They have their powers of attorney, healthcare power of attorney. Some people have a trust. And sometimes people will think, oh, wait a minute, I can put in my will or in my trust, I can put in there who I want my beneficiaries to be. And I think what's really, really important is for people to understand that for your 401k, your IRA, a life insurance policy, any of those things, the beneficiary form trumps everything. You could have anything you want in your will. You could have in your will, I want my 401k to go to my grandson. I want it to go to my son or my daughter. And I could word it that clear, and it will mean absolutely nothing if I don't have my beneficiary form filled out saying the same thing. If I have on my beneficiary form that I want it to go to my daughter, but in my will I've got it going to my son, it's going to go to my daughter. It's going to go if I had my previous wife, it's going to go to my previous wife if that's who's on the beneficiary. The beneficiary form trumps all estate documents. Now, what you can do on your beneficiary forms is you can leave the money to your trust, right? And now my trust document does go into play because I left it in it. Now the trust entity actually received the funds and it can control what I wish there. But if I had something else on my beneficiary designation, on that beneficiary designation, and it did not equal what was in the trust, the beneficiary form always trumps everything. So it's just extremely important for people to really know what is on their beneficiary form, and to understand how they want to do it. But I do think we might want to just, while we're on this topic again, because I kind of opened it up, Merce, could you just maybe kind of hit on a topic as to why would somebody ever want to skip their children and send, and particularly IRA funds to, say, their grandchildren? Why would they ever want to have that be the case?
Yeah. So when a non-spouse inherits an IRA, what happens is under the new rule that got passed back, a few years ago in the Secure Act, the inheritance rule turned into a 10-year distribution rule, where the dollars that are inherited, they have to be, in all essence, cleared out of that IRA by year 10, and there is a minimum distribution that you have to take every single year. And so let's just say, you're in your 80s and you're leaving behind $1 million IRA, maybe split between two kids, and they're also, maybe they're in their late 40s or in their 50s, which typically for most people is going to be their prime earning years, and they also have kids. Well, for so in that example, you've got one child that's inheriting 500,000, another child inheriting 500,000. They're already making, let's imagine, a couple 100,000 as a household income, and so now they have to take this 500,000 inheritance over a 10-year distribution period. So that's pretty substantial dollars that's being added to their tax bill year over year for the next 10 years. And so, from your perspective as the saver and the one that's, passing the money down the line, well, inherently more of that money is going to go towards tax than you probably thought, just because your kids, your next generation, is in a really good place financially. And so, what we've seen from time to time as a strategy is that, well, you could leave it directly to, or maybe not all, maybe it's not a 50-50 split, but maybe it's, a 20 split to your two kid, or yeah, 20% to each of the kids. So now you've given 40 to your direct next generation, and then to the grandkids, let's say there's, three or four of them, and you give them each a smaller portion of it. And so it goes down to them. And now they are probably, in their 15 to 20s and have next to no income. And so they have the ability to take those withdrawals at a much lower, if taxable at all, type of rate, which preserves your dollars, less of it going to taxes. And it probably satisfies your want to, take care of your grandkids as well. So it is this idea of just thinking about how you want inheritance to go, and also thinking through, who's in a place to inherit and still not get their tax situation blown up, versus who do we need to think about a little bit more that's in a good place financially, and what can we do a little bit differently? Because at the end of the day, very likely what someone may do, let's say you leave it to the two kids, and the two high earning kids, and they now take the distributions and pay the taxes at their tax rate, which is going to be the 20+% tax rate. And what do they do next? Well, they hand it to their kids, right? For either for college or for expenses to help them buy the new car. So they just paid higher taxes to give it to them when they could have just skipped them, given it directly to the grandchild, have the grandchild take distributions at their very low tax rate, and with the same accomplishment of being able to help with college funding or buying that car or down payment on the first house, all those things that grandparents want to do for their grandkids. So just being a little bit more strategic with those beneficiary designations. It's not just about getting the money to the person, it's about getting it to them in the best way possible from a tax efficiency perspective.
Yeah.
Um,
So one thing I was just going to mention on that real quick
yeah.
is sometimes a person may go, well, I don't know if I really want to do that. Maybe my grandkids are not old enough to handle that yet. And I want my children to make that decision. And just so you know how you can do that, it's a pretty easy process. If you just want to leave it so that your son or daughter can make the decision later, because if they understand it, they're not going to want to receive the funds because, a lot of times what would happen is if I were to have received IRA money today, and then I said, well, I don't need the money, or I'm going to help my kid go to college, I would pull the money out of the IRA, pay my tax bracket, which is higher than my kid's tax bracket, and then give them the money. It's the worst way to do it. However, if the original owner would have put their son or daughter as the primary beneficiary or the contingent, doesn't matter, puts them in line and says, this is going to go to my children, but then below them, they state that they want, if my child was not in place, it would then go to the grandchildren. And what that allows is it allows your child to then have the power to disclaim. So let me walk you through. Let's pretend it's me, right? Let's say that I am going to inherit this IRA. My mom leaves me her IRA, so she leaves it directly to me. And so I'm the beneficiary, but she also puts my two children as contingents or tertiary or second contingents, wherever I'm at in the line. She puts those saying that if I'm not in place, they get it. So now I find out that I'm the beneficiary. So I get the beneficiary information and I can now disclaim all or a portion of that money that's going to come to me. And when I disclaim it, it automatically pushes it to the next beneficiary. I cannot say where it's going to go. I can only push it to the next in line, not to the side, but in line. And so by my mom having put down my two children, I could disclaim it and it goes directly to them. So if I know I'm going to help my child out anyway, I can disclaim it. It goes directly to them and they have to pay at their tax rate. And the beauty of that is, if that were to happen today, their tax rate is going to be relatively low, especially compared to somebody who's in their prime earning years. And that's anybody that have somebody in their 50s and 60s, that's their prime earning years. And then they got children in their lowest income years for the most part. Well, that's the reason why we would do that. Anything else on this topic of beneficiaries, Merce? I think you were going to say something. I might have cut you off there.
I was just going to bring up and it helps that you brought up a technical term. So that term of disclaim is a technical term to kind of reject your inheritance or a portion of it and send it down the line. There's two other technical terms that I think are important for people to understand in the world of beneficiaries. The first is per capita, and then the second is per Stirpes. Per capita being it's a percentage. When you fill out a beneficiary form, you're assigning percentages. So let's imagine I've got two kids and I want to leave it. I want to leave it to them evenly, so 50-50 split, right? And if one is not there to inherit it, then their 50% share goes to the other. So kid A, let's just say kid A is not around to inherit. So kid B gets 100% of the inheritance. That's what per capita is. And if you have 3 people, you have 4 people, you have 5 people, all it is splitting up the 100%. If someone's not there, then the others get the share of it. Per Stirpes, though, I think has become more popular as kids, as your kids have kids and families, and you want to help take care of the families. You want it to stay in the lineage and go down the line. So per capita is across the lineage, and per Stirpes is going down the lineage. So let's just go back to my example of my two. If my two kids were the primary beneficiaries and they also have kids, so my grandkids, I could do per Stirpes. And so if child A was not there to inherit, child B would not get his 50% share through per Stirpes. Child A, if they're not there to inherit, that 50% would go down their lineage down to the next generation, which would be the grandkids. So there's a lot more to that, but per Stirpes per capita and disclaiming some three technical terms in the beneficiary space. Bottom line is check your beneficiaries, check them often. You know, people leave the workplace, they go to another company, they forget about the old 401k, they forget about how they've set up beneficiaries there. And you kind of, you know, it's so many times we hear about people saying, oh yeah, I have an account over there and I haven't looked at it in 5 or 10 years. Well, I would say take a look at it, check your beneficiaries, because you never know what could happen. And then also just be a little bit strategic on how you're planning for inheritance and the different ways to do it, like we just talked about. Understanding some of those terms can make a big difference when it comes down the line to your inheritors. But that's all I got.
Yeah, and I always like to let you know is that if you're listening to this and you're going, man, I kind of like to talk this through on a very personal level, you can always do so. Just go to our website, pomwealth.net, and you'll see all over the website there, it'll say schedule a call. And then you just click on that and you'll be able to schedule a call with us. You can go directly to the contact us page and do it that way as well. We'd be glad to have a conversation with you and kind of walk through this or any other topic you want to talk about. Well, we hope you enjoyed today's episode. We'll talk to you again next Monday.
If you would like to find more information about Peace of Mind Wealth Management, we invite you to visit our website at pomwealth.net. If you go to the contact page and contact us, we'll send you a free copy of our book, The Peace of Mind Pathway. It lays out our process from beginning to end. Please visit our website.
For more retirement tips, check out these videos. Also, if you find them valuable, please subscribe to our YouTube channel and give us a like.